leadership podcast for those committed to advancing higher education, one conversation at a time. I'm your host, Rosemary Sloan, an advocate for excellence in innovation and academia. Each week, I sit down with leaders who are shaping the future of colleges and universities. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by Dr. Robert Mullaney, an accomplished educator at the University of Tennessee, an executive leader, and a dual doctorate professional in business administration and occupational therapy. He's led initiatives in faculty development, curriculum design, and organizational performance, bridging clinical knowledge with corporate leadership. Together, we will explore the realities of leadership in higher education, where tradition meets transformation, including what it takes to lead complex educational programs, develop faculty teams, and drive results in dynamic, mission-driven environments. So let's think forward. Hi, Robert. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Rose, for having me.
Absolutely. I'm really excited about this conversation. And so as we get started, can you share with our listeners and those who are viewing this podcast a little bit about yourself and how you came into this space of higher academia?
Well, it's a long story, but it really comes from, I would say, avoiding South Florida traffic, right? I
Okay.
think that's where it all came about. I was an occupational therapist, have worked in a variety of clinical settings down in South Florida, Miami, Fort Lauderdale area. And at one point of my career, I was living in Miami and driving to North Fort Lauderdale to what was at the time Holy Cross Hospital as a assistant director over a physical medicine and rehab unit. So, but I don't like traffic, so I would wake up really early, leave the house by 5 o'clock, get there by 6:15, do 10 hours or so, and then drive back. And my days were really long.
Mm.
So I started looking for something a little closer to home, and I came across a university 2.5 miles down the street. And at that time, they were looking for an occupational therapy assistant program director. So my first role in higher education was, my first full-time role was as a program director tasked with putting a new, at the time, it's an associate level occupational therapy assistant program
Mm.
through accreditation, through the build out, hiring of all faculty, and also teaching courses. So that was my first full-time role. And then I've kind of just moved along and found that specialty area of hopping around and starting new academic programs. So that's really to avoid traffic. I looked for work closer to home, and that's how I landed in it. And I loved it. I've loved it ever since. And I've
Love that
really,
story.
yeah, I
I
love
love
traffic.
that story. Well, I am one that can completely appreciate. I used to live in the LA area, and so I completely appreciate the traffic situation and not wanting to be part of that and putting all of your talents and strengths into really good use, which is not sitting behind the wheel with looking at red lights in front of you, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, well, you have been in numerous leadership positions, and I'm sure you've learned a lot. So, can you share something that you've learned that has helped shape your career, that's helped shape your belief in higher education?
hmm Wow. That's a big question. What's shaped my belief, and I am a true believer in the value of higher education done right, right? And I've worked for a variety of settings, higher ed settings. So that being public, private, for profit, nonprofit, I've worked for them all. I think having the students at the center and genuinely creating academic programs and a system where they can access the resources they need to be successful is what has driven me. And as an occupational therapist, that's what we do all day long is we educate patients or clients
Mhm.
on how to accommodate their living situation, how to do and occupy their time the way they wish to. So really it was me working with patients and clients, and now I'm working in with groups of students, right? So education is there, and I think taking away the barriers
Mm.
and genuine, like, you can create money making programs, which is the forte of some institutions, whether students want it or not, or whether it's needed or not. There are these things called feasibility studies,
Mhm.
and
Yes.
it's not always done. What I've learned, it's backward sometimes. Some schools or institutions may hear that this is a great program, it'll bring in a lot of students if we can convince them that this is what they want to do in their careers. Or you do a feasibility study and you determine what that geographic area needs and then
Mhm.
offer what's needed. And I think that's the way to do it. So
That.
long-winded answer, but I
Oh,
can go on for days.
absolutely. Well, I would love for more leaders in higher education to really go on for days about making the students a priority. One of the things that I say when I am facilitating or coaching or doing anything in a leader development program is that when there's conflict, when there's a decision that needs to be made, write the word student and put it right in the center of the table and just say, this decision is going to impact the student. Let's remember that we're here because of students. And I don't like to think of, the word customer, but really they are our consumer. And so with that in mind, what ways do you believe that academic leaders are putting students in the center, making them a priority so they have the access and resources, the support they need to succeed?
Mhm. That is a great question. And I will say that it's easy to state in a mission or goals or objectives that we are student centered.
Mhm.
It's easy to place those letters on a website that says we are all about students and we recognize it's one thing to say it and then another thing to actually show the results behind it. And I think your student outcomes are a big indicator of that. Your student pass rates for things like board exams or, some requirements for healthcare related programs, such as becoming licensed, taking those board exams, becoming licensed, and obtaining meaningful work, or what the government likes to say is gainful employment.
Mhm.
That's really important. I think education for the sake of education, it's everybody's right, and these days you can go online and learn a lot of things. Whether it's true or not, that's the big question mark, right? So you can go to a liberal arts institution and obtain an education in history or philosophy or something that may not result in some sort of work, but if it's going to benefit you in being more of a well-rounded thinker, forward-thinking thinker, right? To contribute to society in that way.
I love
So
that.
I remember being in OT school, and I was one of two or three guys in a class of 50, um, one cohort
Wow.
per year. And there was an older lady, and for me being, just 20 years old or so, she was in her mid 50s. So for me, perspective wise, and she didn't have a plan to go out and practice occupational therapy, but she just wanted to get that degree
Mm.
because she's been around it and taking care of family and friends. And she wanted the formal education so she could check that off her list. And if that's a bucket list thing to do, that's everybody's right to do that, right? But I think overall, to answer the question, is showing student outcomes, that what does a student want to obtain from it, what do they want to gain from it, whether that is employment or just simply knowledge and checking off the bucket list. So
And you share the realities of what's
mm,
really going on. Students
right.
come to higher education for so many different needs. And so let's talk about the realities of students' learning needs and how we are recognizing them and then adapting to those changes. Can you speak to that?
Sure. So coming out of this COVID era, right? I think a lot of these undergraduate students that are going into higher education now, coming out of high school, maybe have experienced the lack of interpersonal communication skills in person,
Mm.
right? So, you think right away, oh, hybrid or remote program offerings for
Mhm.
education. And a lot of people are going with that flow. But I tend to think also a little bit of the opposite, where because of that, these students need to be brought together again in the classroom physically so they can learn some of what they were missing during that COVID era with the remote hybrid, strategy. So I think a good balance of it. I wouldn't go for a fully remote or online because you're still keeping them. Yes, they're comfortable, but is that really growth, or is going beyond your comfort zone true growth? And I think that's what college universities are for.
Interpersonal skills are so important. We talk about the most in demand, just for people going into the profession of higher education, but for our students are around creativity, critical thinking, communication, all these wonderful skills that if it's solely online, students may be missing. And that is the reality of what I know all higher education institutions are experiencing right now, the comfort and the ease of learning online, but then also knowing that those interpersonal skills, which they will have in the work environment, need to be exercised, as I like to call it. And so let's shift a little bit and talk about experience with some challenges. So we know that there's all these evolving issues throughout higher education. Student-centered decision making, navigating the landscape of higher education, the impact of AI, the growing importance of health and wellness in our institutions. So either choose one or speak to these challenges and the ways that we can not only think forward, but move forward.
I think it's about being proactive, right? And again, coming out of this era of everybody going online and being remote for certain things, it would make sense if everybody's work that they were seeking was online or remote. But then that requirement, and just to kind of touch back on and finish the thought from before, when students need to go and do these job interviews or do fieldwork experience with real people, that's where they're feeling that lack. They may have the book knowledge and the knowledge they gain from online, but they're lacking it when it comes to those interpersonal. So I think, from a health and wellness perspective, I'll speak to related to the current question,
Yeah.
is students still experience those things that they don't know what they're experiencing. But it's burnout, it's anxiety, it's hesitation, lack of, you know, confidence in what they're doing, uncertainty, those things. So if we can address those and promote healthy study and work skills, and also work with management to enable those. Some people are very stuck in their ways, and this is how to do it, and we're human. That's natural,
That's
right?
right.
We want to fall into a pattern. We want to follow the path of least resistance, least challenge. That's natural for us to do. But as you get more comfortable in your web, you don't want to wiggle and change as much. So I think for students benefits, and also faculty and staff, having maintaining that sense of flexibility, like we were when we were younger and creative, right? Transparent and asking questions and asking for things. Because if you don't ask for things such as flexibility or time off or some sort of accommodation, then you won't get it guaranteed, right?
Absolutely. Let's move into talking about mental health. And I know the wellness issues, mental health, that's what really drew me to your expertise and wanting to have this conversation. I'm going to be a little bit vulnerable right now. And I don't share this with a lot of people. And now I'm getting ready to share it with a whole bunch of people. I do experience anxiety. It's been something that's been with me for a long period of time. I'm a lifelong learner. I have multiple certificates and degree. I love being with people. I do experience anxiety, and this goes way back. And so when we think about mental health, there are so many different ways that our students or those that we're working with experience this, and then access to it. Trying to find something in an insurance program, or it's really difficult, and you're already feeling, well, in my case, anxious about it. So let's have that conversation. What do you believe are the most pressing challenges and then opportunities for us, not just students, but also employees in a higher education environment for addressing some of these challenges and turning them into opportunities?
Well, it is an uncertain world these days, and I've heard a lot of stories, received a lot of emails, about how to handle these things: burnout, anxiety, stress, just overwhelming stress at work that carries over that work life balance into the home setting. So I think number one is knowing the resources, and promoting what resources are available. And there's information overload everywhere. I mean, you can look anything up, there are so many apps and so many easy ways. And of course, the way I tend to think of it sometimes, which may not be right, is that there are all kinds of hands
Mm.
trying to get in your pockets to get your money, right? So whether it's evidence based and true and tried and it works and there are outcomes to show for that, people don't know. They know by who's spending the most money on who's advertising the most online or on the radio, and they're going that way, and that's where the traffic is going. And it's still up in the air as to if it's effective or not. If it, is it doing what it's promising to do? So I think for any employer, especially in higher education, having at least one designated wellness person for that university or campus. There are so many schools that are dealing with these problems, and the way they're dealing with it is dealing with turnover. They're pouring money into marketing to fill positions, hoping that the next one is the right fit. Um, as opposed to being proactive and offering wellness related programs that can prevent and work with people that are experiencing these things.
Uh,
So then you have turnover and you have a lot of hopping around and that mentality of if you want to move up, you need to move around. Well, there's a lot of research out there that shows the difference between people who have commitment to their organization, um, pay not being a factor, but comfort, fit, belongingness, support from the employer. All of these factors and many others contribute to keeping good employees, as opposed to just spilling money into the advertising and marketing for recruiting. Hopefully, it's like a shot in the air. You know, people are great with their initial interview, but then when they show up, it's a different story
it's a
sometimes.
different story. So let's take what you're saying and let's apply it to a student now. So I have been hearing a lot about how retention is the new enrollment strategy. And so if we are looking at retention, then let's address that from what you've just talked about in terms of a mental health or, a wellness aspect. If we want to retain our students and we're thinking that maybe some of the drop off could be whether it's a wellness issue or something else related to mental health, how do we focus on the student?
Again, I think it's having a designated either person or group of people in a department really focused exclusively on that. I work out of what's called the Center for Health Education and Wellness with many other individual coordinators that focus on different aspects related to student wellness. And that may be alcohol and other drugs, or collegiate recovery programs, or sexual assault and violence, and those types of things, or general health and wellness. So I think for any institution, having designated people on that task will get them that much more forward, as opposed to having a thought and simply writing, "We are student focused, we support student mental health." Saying it is a whole different story, but showing the people, the team behind it, the arsenal, and showing the results as a result of those people is important.
Really love what you're saying because the way I'm interpreting what you're saying, and I'm wondering if our listeners are interpreting it this way too, is that you have words on a piece of paper, you post words on a wall, you promote them on your website. But if I were to walk on your campus, what would I see? Would I see student centered? Would I see safety or belonging or integrity? What would I see? And I think modeling it is how I'm interpreting what you are saying. Is that correct?
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
it's sort of like if you have a room full of students and you introduce a new student to it, and everybody wraps their arms around that student and just hugs and supports. That is the execution of it, as opposed to having a new outside student come into that room and that person being pushed to the wall and pushed to the wall until there's a hole in the wall, and then the push is out the door. So it's that belongingness is so important. And there is a healthy initiative across universities from what I've observed, in welcoming students, doing sorts of events and welcome nights and family support system nights and things like that. So it's a good
Really
start,
good to
especially in
hear.
the fall. Yeah.
I, I'm really happy to hear that that's what's going on. Um, Hopefully at your organization, but across the country, maybe even globally, that we are beginning to do that to make students feel very welcomed there. And that is going to help retain them as well. Let's shift a bit and talk about some technological advancements. I know you're in occupational therapy. So higher education institutions need to be prepared for the next technological advancement, but this is going to cause disruption in some respect and maybe even resistance. People are like doing things the way they like to do things. So, in your opinion, what's the best way for us to prepare for what's coming next?
Good question. And when you say technology, I think artificial intelligence, and I think of people's sense of uncertainty in them not having jobs. I saw a meme the other day, and it was a picture of somebody. It says, "This generation is working hard on, their degrees for jobs that are not going to be available anymore in the future." And, there may be some I think the way to offset that is to become masters of the art of communication and, again, interpersonal communication.
Mhm.
Ironically, those things that we're lacking right now the most at this time is what's going to make us most vulnerable when the time comes for artificial intelligence to kick in. Because, I mean, it may have some really good interpersonal skills, but it may take a while for that too. So I think the listening skills, those softer interpersonal skills, understanding the genuine clinical or logical reasoning in conversations. I do this exercise that I learned at a conference, in some of the webinars I do, and it's a listening exercise. You have somebody tell a story, and you have three or four people, let's say students, new students, getting ready to go out to field work, and they're all listening to a different angle of that story. It could be the emotions, the values expressed, facts of the story, the underlying currents.
Yeah.
And, they write that down, and then they complete the circle, and then they report that back to the storyteller.
Mhm.
And the storyteller will either validate or invalidate, say, you picked up these emotions that are not really accurate. That's not how I meant to come across. And then we stand back and then tell the students, was it difficult to pick out the facts, the values, the emotions, the underlying currents? And they'll say, yes, there was so much in it. But reality says that we have to listen to all of those things at the same time in every interaction we have. So it's a great exercise to make people realize the potential for improvement in those areas.
It's a great exercise, and I think not just for students, but I think there's many adults
Hmm.
that would benefit from that exercise as well. We talk about active listening, and I'm thinking, as you're talking about this, I'm thinking the connection to emotional intelligence. First talking about that social awareness piece before we can get into the relationship management piece, and really strengthening the empathy piece as well. And all of that centered around emotional intelligence. And I see you shaking your head. So there's probably some connection there. Uh, Robert, as we come toward the end here, I'm really curious about your goals for continued development. I mean, you have two doctorates, you are an executive leader, but, in talking with you earlier, I know you're a lifelong learner. We haven't talked about how you want to continue to grow and develop to be the best Robert you can be.
Yeah, good question. Another good question. And every day is a learning experience for me. I think mixing it, having a variety of experiences. Again, classroom, formal education is one way. uh, being informed about how you're selecting the resources to educate yourself by, because there's, like I said, information overload. There's a lot out there, and a lot of it is no good. Staying in tune with that sense of creativity. I said, if I'm going to take any course at UT, I think it's going to be like a ceramics course or an art class or something like that, that takes me back to that sense of, what I used to do in high school and enjoyed and loved doing, or music or something like that. I think I learn a lot. I also have a nonprofit organization that I run. It's called OT Wellness. So it's a OT Health and Wellness, otwellness.org. And I do a lot of consulting with organizations. And every time I take a project, it's a learning experience for me. So I think that is just one way to keep current with the situations and how different organizations are handling different challenges.
Love what you're saying because that creative piece that we need so much is really about turning to wonder.
Hmm.
What is really going to light my fire again? What's going to energize me? What's going to bring me back, as you're talking about, to my love? The things that really are fun, that's that sweet spot, bliss, creative excitement, where I feel like I'm in the zone, in the flow, and just letting my mind or let the other side of my brain spend some time just having the space to do that, I think is what I'm trying to say. And so I love those examples that you've given. So happy that we've had this time together. Do you have any final thoughts as we get ready to wrap this up?
Just to, I love the theme of this Think Forward, podcast. It's amazing. I think bringing in a variety of perspectives is exactly what people need to hear. Listening and maybe taking notes and any ideas that pop in your head. We have hundreds, maybe thousands of ideas a day, and then they're gone the next day. So writing these down and looking back at them and taking a toll of that. So I think you're doing a great job here. I love it. And thank you for having me on the show.
Absolutely. Well, that's a wonderful endorsement. And I am hoping that those of you that are listening out there will write your review. You'll talk about what you liked about this podcast and this message that Robert is sharing and the conversation that we're having. And of course, if you're interested in being part of the podcast, you can go to ourleadershipjourney.com. You can reach out to me there. I write weekly tips and I post them there, but I would love to hear more from you. So follow on Instagram, on YouTube, wherever it is that you can find Think Forward at ourleadershipjourney.com. I would appreciate that. But listen to what Robert has to say. Join the conversation, be part of it, take notes, have a voice. And that's what this is really about. So, for all of you out there, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.